Welcome to Selene's Gateway, Horoscopes from the Moon. Today I'm going to be offering a Q&A session for anybody who decides to join me. And if not, if people don't come to ask questions in the chat, that's fine. I've got some other things that I can look at and do. But first, as always, we will start with the invocation of gratitude. But to be completely honest, like I tend to be, I'm pretty much a chaos goblin when it comes to all of this, like technology stuff. I'm very, very rudimentally a a tactile learner. Like I'm really good at tactile things, and so no matter how much I desire to have things organized and prepared, it's always kind of a struggle to deal with the intricacies of technology and how it can how it can throw you random curveballs, like do you want to update now, so forth and so on, just like whatever. But that being said, with our eyes on the imagined sky, we're going to turn our gaze to the east so we can see the sun is at its zenith point. It's near the MC here in Portland, Oregon. The moon is not far behind. And we're going to use our technological gaze to be able to see the stars rising in the east. And we have Pegasus and the fish and the water pourer and the Capricornian sun, moon. Because these are the stars of now and not the zodiacal season. And that's part of the process of building this calendar is talking about precession and what we're doing with all of that information. But we will carry forward. And so we will start with gratitude. We start with the land beneath our feet. We give gratitude to the land for supporting us all of our lives, for being the foundation that upholds us and places that we gather under, for being the soil that nurtures all of life. We recognize her, Mother Earth, as Gaia, mother to all, birther and nurturer of all. Through her gifts, that we are blessed with these bodies that contain our spirit. Also that all life is grateful to her, and she gives life to all without demand of price or return. May we give as she gives. With the land, we recognize those that were here before us and were displaced by colonizing authorities. We recognize the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, and others who thrived for time immemorial. We would like to see a just world where these lands are returned to their traditional relatives. We give gratitude to the water that nurtures us and gives us strength. We have deep gratitude for its clean properties, and we believe it is our responsibility to help ensure that clean water remains available for all, including our plant and animal relatives of the present and the future. We give gratitude to all the plants. They provide us and many more with food and shelter. We thank them for their willingness to offer healing when we are sick, and we are grateful that we still have people who know how to commune and make medicine with our plant relatives. We give gratitude to all the animals. We are humbled when they give up their lives to be food and clothing for us. We hope to see a restoration of the relationships with both the plant and animal communities, that we can return to a balance and harmony. We give gratitude to the air for providing us with breath and lift. We are grateful to the spirit of breath and wind for carrying our words and prayers and laughter on its back. We give gratitude to the sun for providing us with light and warmth. We have gratitude that the balance of power shared between Gaia and Helios can be felt through the seasons, a reminder that all things need rest, as well as growth. May we also give and share our light with such wisdom. We give gratitude to the stars for guiding us. We believe that as we shed and return our bodies to Gaia, our souls return to the heavens, that the heavens contain our ancestors, and that through their light provide us with wisdom, comfort, and guidance. They taught some of us the rhythms of the seasons and how to navigate across both the seas and skies. We give gratitude to the 5 wandering stars, the wild sheep of Babylon, and the grahas of India. We thank them for holding, warning, and teaching us through their spheres of finality, mercy, conflict, love, and ingenuity. And we give gratitude to Selene. She maintains the waxing and waning of the great ocean, as well as the generation and corruption of our lives. She softens the harsh rays and has taught many of us the rhythms of the plant and animal communities. She is the teacher of astrology and midwife of all who are born. May we bring comfort and guidance as she does. And so it is. And so it is. And so here we are. And I wonder if anybody is going to be joining me. But like I said, there's plenty for me to express or talk about while I'm here. And maybe I should have generated like a presentation. That might have been something I should have done. But like I said, I'm kind of a chaos goblin when it comes to technology. So I just kind of assumed that the people that have been following my work may have questions about it. Which maybe the hope was that people could just watch this later And through that, I guess what I could do is just kind of like walk through this month's almanac and talk about all the different pieces. So let's take a look at how I can transfer this into the stream. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pull up the the PDF format basically. That's what I should do. So we're going to go And I guess while I'm doing that, I should say that today, as I'm recording this, as a way of tracking time, of being one with time, one of the things that I do, which you may have noticed in my posts, if you've read my posts on Patreon or on Substack, is I always kind of give everything like a time signature. And that's not because I'm electing things. I don't, to be clear, there's a process in astrology that you may or may not be aware of, dear listener, called elections. And it's basically like when you believe in astrology and when you study astrology, you understand that time shifts its qualities, that there's a subtle difference in the vibrational radiance that we feel and experience as time continues to march forward. And there's a process of handing off and evenly distributing the process of filtering these temporal qualities in astrology. And because of understanding that, you can look at charts and say to yourself, well, what would be the best time to accomplish a thing? And I just wanted to be clear that I put timestamps on everything, not because I'm always trying to post at the appropriate time to make it the most beneficial time for the thing that I post, but more as like a historical record thing. Like maybe one day it'll matter that I put time stamps on everything. So with that being said, it is the day of Saturn. It is the hour of Selene. And it is the day of Saturn because it is the third face of Selene. And the third face of Selene gives us the night of Mars, which then translates into the day of Saturn. And it's the hour of Mercury, or it's the hour of Selene because it's the 7th hour of the day. Which starts at noon 09 or 12 p.m. 09. And is the 7th hour of the day. In the Gregorian calendar, we find ourselves on December 23rd of 2025. In Selene's Almanac, we find ourselves at the 3rd day of year 0, month 0. And so, using that as like kind of a starting point, there's a bunch of things I can just like express about how Selene's Almanac works. And first of all, comparatively, the Gregorian calendar starts every day at midnight on the 24-hour clock. Which helps ensure that every morning is a new day, which is nice and it's convenient and it's comforting. That every sunrise is the next day in the calendar. And that's kind of the whole thing. That's kind of like the linchpin of the whole Gregorian system. Is that the Julian Gregorian system has fit us into this way of perceiving time as a linear, unending, marching forward, cyclical, kind of like how the word scythe is kind of in the word cyclical, like just phonetically. And unrelational. The day changes without the sun. It's not determined by anything that has to do with where the sun is in its relationship to the earth, northern or southern hemisphere. We just celebrated the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. But when you're operating on a 24-hour clock that turns over the days at midnight, that turns over the year on a random moment in the Earth-Sun cycle, then you have no relationship to the experiential aspect of time itself. So in contrast to that, when we turn back towards an experiential version of time, when we turn back to our ancestral roots of time relationship, a lot of cultures, including the one that I'm the closest connected to, the Irish culture, or the Anglo Islands. I don't know. I don't want to. The Stonehenge time system. The days start, or the days turn over as soon as the sun is set. So the day ends at sunset on Selene's Almanac. And the reason for this is several. And so the first reason is because everything starts in darkness. We plant our seeds in the darkness of soil. Even scientists, which I don't root my understanding in modern science. I allow myself to be informed by modern science. I'm not a science denier. That's not the platform of my understanding. I allow science to inform me of the things that it learns. And I try to learn a lot about science. And I've had to learn a lot about astronomy in order to even get to making this almanac. Um, but uh, but I'm not like, I don't try to be affirmed by science. I don't need to feel affirmed by science, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's plenty of experiences that I have, that we have. If you are an observative person and notice the synchronicities that happen when you start building relationship with time and space, and also the unseen realm of spirituality, whatever you believe that is, you notice synchronicities. And, and synchronicities is a Jungian term. And Jung was an astrologer. And so I like being able to relate to him in that way by using that term, because there isn't a quantifiable, observable, scientific method, version, or mathematical process to be able to encapsulate the synchronicities you experience when you start paying attention to these unseen realms of time, space, and spirit, that you just end up doing when you start practicing astrology. Because as soon as you start studying astrology, you're both studying time, space, and spirit. Like, that's just immediately what you are dealing with when you jump into that realm. So it opens you up to synchronistic moments. So everything starts in darkness. The whole universe started in darkness. Everything you desire starts in an unseen place. So Selene's Almanac starts at darkness. The other reason why Selene's Almanac starts at darkness is because we start the month with the first visible moon. We count the days, regardless if she's visible or not. We have that ability. We have math. We have that unseen force. We can calculate it. So the first day of Selene's Almanac is ruled by the sun. And the second day is always when she's going to be available for visibility. So that's, but she's only going to be able to be visible in the west at sunset, as the sun sets, so at night. And so the first day after the dark moon, or the conjunction of the sun and moon, The moon, she's not visible because she only travels at a speed of roughly 13 degrees a day, and the sun marches forward at a single degree a day across our sky. And so, because of that, Selene is never visible after the conjunction for a full day. And so, we give the rulership of that night to the sun. And then the second day after the. I guess I can show this on Stellarium. I keep toggling between like trying to pull up the Almanac and then talking about the philosophical points. And so maybe what I'll do is I'll just take a second. I'm gonna switch to the metronome. And I just suggest practicing just a little bit of breathing while I reorganize myself. So let's actually take a look at the Almanac. Let's root ourselves. I'm going to root myself in the moment by actually just putting the Almanac up. And kind of just like walking through it. So it's Selene's Almanac. Year 0, Capricorn season, year of the immortal twin. Why the immortal twin? One of the things that I'm going to be doing with the Almanac is naming the years and months after what star the moon is going to be closest to when she's full. So that's a little bit of like using what's coming as a way of rooting us in the moment. And it also helps invite precession into our conversation about time and about the zodiacal months. So when Selene rises as a full moon this month, and when I say the word month, I'm talking about Selene's cycle. I have the calendar separated. I have the almanac separated into two functions: a seasonal side, which is based on the sun's movement in its relationship to the earth, which is going to be tracked by the tropical zodiac, mainly because I'm not ready to I want Selene's Almanac to be relatable. And we have a historically rich tradition of the tropical zodiac being the signifier of the changing of the seasons. It's anchored to the solstice and equinox points, regardless of what the stories the stars are telling. However, the movement of the stars matters because I believe that their starlight is significant and important. I think there's a difference, to use the royal stars as an example. I think there's a difference in the time and quality of light of Antares. I think Antares, the heart of the scorpion, I think it was more ruthless when it was in the Scorpio zodiacal season. And that would have been about 720 years ago. Yeah, roughly 720 years ago is when it was just at the end of the Scorpio zodiacal season. And I also believe personally in this beautiful moment of astrology that occurred when these constellations matched up with these seasonal points. And there was this point of relationship and understanding that like I feel synchronized to give us this foundational interpretation of how starlight and time is experienced on Earth. And then as the procession occurs, we're able to perceive these fluctuations, and the stars become a longer transit system, which in Vedic timekeeping terminology is described as yuga cycles. So it's, as far as nomenclature goes, as far as like the words we use to indicate sections of time, like we're in Selene's Almanac, we're going to continue to use the tropical zodiac names for the 30 degrees that the sun travels every 12 portions of the year. And we'll name the lunar months after the stars that the full moon rises next to in each lunar month. And so that's a breakdown of why it's Capricorn season and the full moon and the month of and the year of the immortal twin, because I'm going to name each year. This is looking towards the future. When I decided this, I'm going to name each year after the full moon of the first month of the year. And so it's the month of Pollux and the year of Pollux, because as the moon rises in the east, when it's full this month, it's going to be conjunct. It's going to be really close to both Jupiter and Pollux. And so that's why year 0 is named what it is. So how did I get here is another question that somebody might ask. And as soon as 2020 happened, a lot of things shifted for a lot of people. And one of the things that shifted for me is that it released me from the restraints of the service industry. It gave me access to a full 24 hours. And one of the things that me and my partner decided to do in that length of period was to pick up meditating again. I started doing these Instagram lives of just offering space for people to join me in Vipassana meditation at noon every day. This, I believe, is what started the ball rolling of me getting back into tarot, getting back into astrology, getting deeper in tune with the occult. This process of clearing space, clearing time, making room for something that wasn't so focused on the culinary industry, that wasn't so focused on the service industry, because everything that we were doing was kind of like rooted around like maybe running a restaurant someday or opening up a butcher shop or something along those natures. Like it was all really like career filtered or work filtered, labor filtered. And there was a lot of other stuff going on, and there's a lot of other layers, and part of that layer is the rebellious nature of building a timekeeping system that's separate from the standard. It is a rebellious act. And so once I started getting into astrology and tarot again and stuff like that, and like maintaining this space, once I had to go back to work, I continued to keep space for these 4 practices, for pulling a tarot card every morning, for the study of the stars, for spiritual exploration. Like I did not relinquish that space. Like I was able to claim that space, and I will not relinquish it. And then as I started to learn more about astrology, me and my partner started doing this practice of witnessing the moon. And so I got this like wild obsession with the notion of moonrise. And so for over a year and a half, maybe even closer to 2 years, we witnessed the moon at moonrise nearly every single day. We missed a few days. The moon is a very forgiving goddess. But what does that mean? And that's where this relationship with the lunar aspect of time, lunar consciousness, like really started revealing itself. Because one of the reasons why the moon changes its face, changes its cycle, changes its demeanor, um, is because whereas the sun roughly follows this heartbeat rhythm of a 24-hour cycle between its relationship between the earth and the sun, the earth's rotation, and the sun and the earth's movement around the sun as the sun pulls the earth through the universe. uh the moon is moving slightly quicker than the earth's rotation, and so it's roughly like 24 hours and 45 minutes. So that means that every day the moon rises 45 minutes later than the sun after the dark moon conjunction. And so that means that for the first quarter of Luna's cycle, she rises in the morning hours. And for the second quarter of Luna's cycle, she rises in the afternoon hours. And at the full moon, she rises as the sun sets. And then, for the third quarter, she rises in the evening hours from, we'll just like break up an even clock to say like from 6 p.m. to midnight. And then, the last quarter, the last waning phase, she starts to rise between midnight and 6 a.m. And that's the challenging part if you're trying to live a gregarian service industry lifestyle while also praising the moon at moonrise every day. And so for a quarter of every month, for nearly 2 years, I was setting an alarm to wake myself up between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. in order to light a candle and say a prayer to Selene as she rose in the east. And so this practice of like doing the noontime meditation, transforming into this spiritual practice of saying a prayer to Selene as she rises in the east for, hundreds of days in a row, nearly. It started transforming my consciousness. It started transforming my understanding of time and space, as well as like engaging with books that were brought to me, like Braiding Sweetgrass, and also Sand Talk, and several other books that help give a lens on life and time and space that opens up your philosophical understanding beyond the solar consciousness and allows you to experience everything in a more relational stance. it's, this is what kind of like started me on this process, doing the tarot cards in the morning, doing the moonrise practice, doing the sun meditations, and then so I had pulled away from the noon meditations, because it was definitely interfering with my ability to. Oh, what are some of the other books? Welcome to the chat, Annabeth Rose. There's a book called Zero. What's its full title? Like Zero, a Dangerous Idea, I think is what it's called. And basically it's mathematician's uh, this mathematician's exploration of the history of zero. Um, Basically one of the functions of why Western science kind of like trailed Islamic science and Indic science, using Indic very broadly here, and also Chinese, basically we'll say Asian continental science, including the Islamic and also African mathematics. The reason why the West trailed that and kind of had to like adopt their practices through the process of like exploration and colonialism is because of the concept of zero. The idea of nothing was so dangerous to the Greco-Roman consciousness that there was a death cult, like murdering people who would talk about zero. And you this isn't just like secret society stuff. This is like, no, this is like the same reason why they killed Galileo, or like why they, tried Galileo and killed Socrates. Like there's all these like historical events of these like thinkers getting killed. You could even say that the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth could also be linked to this idea of zero or nothingness, because for them the concept of nothingness just shattered their whole philosophical viewpoint. But you need zero in order to do complex mathematical constructs. And so the book Zero, a Dangerous Idea, I believe that's its title. You'll find it if you just type that in. It's close enough to the title. And I could also spend time just looking it up on my phone, which I should probably do. Zero, Dangerous, so that I could get the author's name out there. Yeah, Zero, the Biography of a Dangerous Idea. Is written by Charles Safe. It was published on February 7th of 2000, which is interesting, because the thing that's interesting about the year 2000 is it was a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction year in Taurus. And so it's interesting that book was published that year. For those that aren't aware, Saturn and Jupiter conjoin every 20 years and is tracked in the Vedic time-keeping system every 30 and 60 years as well. So that's through a 60-year cycle as well. And also the 60-year cycle is the cycle of the Chinese zodiac through all the elements. That's when it resets at the wood rat, which the last time that happened was in 1984. And so every 60 years the Chinese zodiac has cycled through all the animals and all 5 elements, 12 times 5, and is also linked to Jupiter. So there's some interesting resonance with this book being published during that date. Once again, a synchronicity. Some of the other books. Another great one that really opened up was Inflamed. Inflamed, The Anatomy of Injustice, I believe, is what it's called. Also, just since I'm throwing authors' names out there, Braiding Sweetgrass was written by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer of the Potawatomi here on Turtle Island. And Sand Talk is written by Tyson Yonko Porta, who is a indigenous Australian. And that book definitely does a great job of working with perception of time and relationship to space. Oh yeah, so yeah, Inflamed is called Deep Medicine. It's called Inflamed, Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice by Rupa Maria and Raj Patel. And that's another great book because what they do in that book is it's divided into systems of the body, and they take the systems of the body and relate it to environmental systems. So, say the lungs with air, and the blood system with rivers. And then they also talk about how the same way that like dams affect rivers is the same way that clogged arteries affect our bodies, and how the dam, they do, obviously they do a great job of this, but like the dam is a social structure and a creation that does a thing for a purpose, but its thing and its purpose is only related to the relationship of water to humans and not water to everything else in the watershed ecosystem that a river creates for. And so through that process of like examining environmental and social structures as related to human health, it attacks the idea that you could diagnose someone for their issues without diagnosing the social and environmental conditions that they live within. And this is how we should be relating to time. And this is what astrology teaches you as you learn it, and which is why the almanac that I'm making is important, is because in every culture, it's usually, I said every and then said usually, as far as I can tell, every culture that I've looked into so far, from my current understanding, it's the priests, it's the spiritually, divinely connected class of people who are in charge of the calendrical system. Their ability to be observant, to watch the natural fluctuations of both the sky and the earth, to record and understand them, to track them, to project them into the future for the success of building harvest cycles. Like, this is the job of the priestly class. And the priestly class that runs our calendar is still the Roman Catholic Church. The calendar we use is rooted in the year of Julius Caesar, when he broke the original calendar that the Romans and Greeks used, which was a lunar solar combo calendar. He broke the lunar calendar and shattered our connection. And by our connection, I'm saying anybody who's grown up with the Gregorian calendar, anyone, regardless of your culture, if you've grown up with the Gregorian calendar and use it as a system for facilitating your life, you are connected to Julius Caesar through temporal resonance. And you are disconnected. Not saying that that there's people that aren't trying. Like, this is one of the things that I love, is that you start looking around at anybody who becomes like a green witch, or starts doing yoga, or like it's as soon as you start opening, it seems that as soon as you start opening yourself up to a spiritual side of reality, you like instantly start paying attention to where the moon is. Not saying that you have an astronomical understanding of where the moon is, but like you start thinking more about the what we call the new moon, which is actually the dark moon conjunction, and the full moon, and like you start connecting to those things, especially for men, male-bodied individuals. It's interesting to watch them start connecting with lunar consciousness. There's a softening that comes over them, for the most part, from what I've seen. Not saying that they also cannot express toxic energy or ambitions, but there's like a relationship that starts to be being built. And so after I started doing these moonrise things, like there was a part of me that in the middle of winter last year, I'd started reconnecting to the noon thing, but I had all this like astrological like knowledge now. And so instead of doing like a noon meditation, we started doing prayers to the sun when it reached the MC every day. And it was great, especially in the dead of winter. Like, it's really great for, I found through that practice that it's really great for enlivening the spirit in the darkest time of the year, to light a candle and say a prayer to the sun every day. It brings that solar energy like deep into you, and I find it really revitalizing. And through all this time of like these practices, I like made a vow to myself that like next year, as in now, where we are now, next year I want to start my own calendar. And my imagination was, at the time, because of my understanding, that I would just like, yeah, I'll just use the zodiacal seasons, and we'll just use the zodiac as the calendar. Like, that's just what we'll do. That's just what I'm going to do. And that's kind of where the thought process started. And then the universe grabbed me by the hand and was like, yes, but. And so it started opening me up to precession, because I was solely a Hellenistic practicing astrologer at the time, because that's what I was learning through Austin Coppock's Fundamentals of Astrology and everything else that I was reading. But also, like, there was this part of me that was led by Sasha Ravich's lead and entourage, or community, I should say, actually, that was like really relating to the stars. So like these three pieces, these three components had been like swirling around me, but separately. And then I went to Norwalk, and I saw a bunch of lectures there, and I signed up for this class from Freedom Cole called the Yoga of Astronomy, and signed up for this class with Gemini Brett, who is very rooted in astronomy also, and signed up for this class with Cameron Cassidy, who's also really rooted in astronomy, but specifically Babylonian and Egyptian historical astronomy. And I started following this account called Antenorphe on Patreon that just has recreated the Egyptian religious calendar and posts about it every day. And so all of a sudden, this summer I found myself wrapped up in 4 different astronomical based calendrical like theory classes. And yeah, it was amazing. And so now I have the knowledge to actually build a solar lunar almanac. So, what makes it lunar? What makes it solar? What makes it lunar and solar is the solar aspect is the zodiac, the tropical zodiacal seasons. That's the solar aspect. So we follow the sun. Let's see if I can do a little rotation here. Nope, doesn't look like it. We follow the sun by following the degrees, and I hope you print this out so you don't have to look at it sideways. Actually, you know what I can do? I can go like this. There we go. So we start at the top, and we have Capricorn season. And we have the lunar month, the month of the immortal twin, which I've already explained is because when it rises as a full moon, it is near the star Pollux, which in a tropical zodiacal chart, we would see the moon in Cancer. But that's why I'm naming it after the star, is to enliven the fact that the stars do move, that they're their own transit. But time happens on Earth and is held by the 4 corners of the year, which are the solstice and equinox points. You could even call these points the ascendant, descendant, MC and IC of the Earth through time. And so then I go to the sun date time, which is simply always keeping track of when the sun moves from degree to degree. This is important because, as you can already see by tracking the hours and minutes of when this takes place, it changes. It's not the same time every day because the Earth changes speed and velocity both in its rotational spin and in its rotation around the sun. The Earth has a faster and slower part of its elliptical orbit around the sun. The winter is actually, Aquarius season is actually when the Earth is moving at its highest velocity, and Leo season is when it's moving at its slowest velocity. These perihelio, apihelio, I think is what their terms are, points move very slowly. It's like a yuga cycle slow is how fast they move. So it's not even like when the seasons are moving faster and slower isn't something that we're going to perceive in a human lifetime, but we know it exists. And part of the reason why it exists is this like flow function that happens as the Earth is reacting to the gravitational pull of the sun, because the sun is actually the horse that is pulling. And I like it. Actually, yeah, as we're going into... No, this is actually really nice that I'm coming across this metaphor at this moment. the Chinese New Year that we're moving into is the fire horse. And that is what the sun is. The sun is a fiery horse that is pulling all of the planets behind it. And the Earth's spin around the sun speeds up and slows down like being tugged on a like bungee cord. Like if you're sitting in a red wagon and holding on to a bungee cord and somebody else is pulling you, you're going to have this spring effect of the gravitational force of the person pulling, the bungee cord reaching its maximum extent, and then the reaction of pulling the earth forward, pulling you through the wagon. You're going to go really fast at first and then slowly slow down and then reach the extension of the bungee cord and then snap again. And that's the cycle of the Earth's rotation around the sun, because the Earth's rotation around the sun isn't just elliptical, it's also a spiral. Time is a spiral. And so, that's part of what I'm representing and expressing and showing in the Almanac here. Now we get down to the lunar face. So that's what this is tracking. The sun date time is tracking the moment when the sun moves from degree to degree at 0 of each degree. The lunar face is what names the days, which then names the planetary hours, which is a lot to say all at once. There's a lot of concepts there built all into one thing. But one of the reasons why we have 30, 31, 28 day months in the Gregorian calendar is because it is based off of the moon. It's a callback to the fact that months used to be measured by the moon's cycle. We even find in Hesiod's Days of Work, if you reread it after you get some astrological knowledge, you find at the end he talks about the moon, and he talks about the 30 days of the moon, and he gives and he does a thing that you find in a lot of calendrical poems and texts and occult books, is you find these moon days are good for this, these moon days are not good for this, and then Al-Biruni in the Shams al-Marif, the working of the sun text from the Islamic period, they do the same thing, but they use the lunar mansions, and he just, when the moon is here, he has a famous one that I like that's like, when the moon's here, just do not do most things. Just try not to do anything. And it's and Hesiod has some of those in that poem. But this combination of the planetary days, planetary hours, we see it preserved in the Gregorian calendar because it was a part of the Julian calendar, because the Catholic Church worships the sun on Sunday. And so it's there because it needed to be preserved. However, this is not how the days were named. The days were not named on an endless cycle of unrelenting time. This is something that I learned through the Yoga of Astronomy through Freedom Cole's class, is I learned about tithis. And so what a tithi is, tithi can just be translated to calendrical day. and it's just like a word. It's like a word for day, but it but without the with the implication of the 24-hour cycle. And within that system is the planetary day name scheme. And by that I mean these tithis are given planetary correlations in the same order as the calendrical system, and they are based off of the phases of the moon. And so that's what I'm doing here. However, it gets messy, which is probably one of the reasons why Julius Caesar broke the calendars, because the Roman consciousness is all about rationalization and reason and making things in a precise order and structure. And that and so like messiness, was just like more and more like seen as like wrong, and we feel that today in our culture thousands of years later, because this division of sun and moon consciousness was in 48 BCE. So we're talking a long time ago. And the reason why it gets messy is because the moon changes speed, just as the Earth changes speed in its rotation around the sun. The moon changes speed throughout each month. And so we end up with these things, with these moments where the moon is at its slowest, so it doesn't change its face fast enough to be perceivable by the next time it's visible. And it'll skip a face when it's at its fastest. So then we end up with 2 days a month that are back to back that have the same rulership, and 1 day a month that gets skipped entirely. And this upsets the clean cycle of the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's not that clean, because the moon changes shape, because the moon changes speed, because the moon matters. So what are planetary hours? Briefly, in this relationship with time, if you have astrological knowledge, and I implore anybody who doesn't know anything about planetary hours to explore and understand what these can and cannot be used for. By cannot, I simply mean I wouldn't pray for love I wouldn't pray for love during Saturn hour unless I was praying for marriage. And so there's like nuance, but like that's an example. I would pray for love during Venus hour. Unless I did actually really want to get married, then maybe I would pray to Venus on Saturn's day, or to Venus on Saturn's hour during Venus's day, if I was like hoping to like get wedlocked. And but the planetary hours system is basically a system that divides daylight and nighttime, daylight and darkness, daylight and moon time, daylight and moonlight, however you want to perceive that, into an equal shared opportunity for the planets to have an expression and lens to coat our experience in. So the light shining down upon us, or the energy that we're swimming in, the fecundity of the world shifts from planetary hour to planetary hour. But it all starts, everyone agrees, from Babylon to India to any other culture that used this system thousands of years, everyone agrees. And the pre Julius Caesar, the moon names the day. And that comes from a text called the Tantra Loka by Abhinata Gupta, who was creating a compilation text of all of Tantra systems in the 900s in what we call India. And he was utilizing texts that were thousands of years old. And so, or at least 1,000 years old. I'm not good at being a historian. I'm just a student of history, time, and space. I'm not a scholar. Nor will I ever claim to be. But in that text, in Tantra Loka, in chapter 6, which is what the Yoga of Astronomy class was rooted in, it basically gives the instructions of how to build a calendar, or how to understand time and its movement and its motion. And in there, it states that the part of the relationship between the sun and the moon is that the sun illuminates the moon, and because of that, the moon names the day. And so that's where the days of the week, both time and name, like number and name, come from. The first day of the week, the second day of the week, the third day of the week. These are all guided by the moon. And so each face is given rulership or custodianship or coincidence with one of the planets, and it goes in the order of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then repeats, which then sets the stage for our planetary hours, which in Selene's Almanac we begin at nightfall, because that's when we can see the moon's face, especially the first face, the second day after the dark moon conjunction. That's the only time we can see her second face is in the west at sunset. So we start our almanac at night, just as we're born in darkness, just as we plant seeds in darkness, just as the beginning for the almanac, the beginning of the year is the winter solstice. Everything starts in darkness. And you can tell in Western culture that our relationship to darkness is part of what's missing. Our relationship to death, our relationship to nothingness, our relationship to zero. It's all rooted in the lack of the lunar consciousness, in my humble opinion. So today, the sun will be in the second degree of Capricorn. As of 6 p.m. Luna's face last night was the third face, illuminated at 7 degrees and 41 minutes of Aquarius, and gave us the night of Mars, which birthed us into the day of Saturn, which then found us starting our live stream at around 12:09 p.m. during the hour of the moon. And that's why that table is written the way it is. What's interesting about the faces too is there's a really interesting relationship between the sun and moon, and that's that the moon moves roughly 13 degrees every day, and the sun moves 1 degree every day. So the defining point between each face is a perfect 12-degree cycle. When the moon has reached the end of its travel and the sun has reached the end of its travel, you track the changing of the face when that perfectly matches at 12 degrees. And this is one of the magic numbers. You see these numbers popping up everywhere in time when you start studying it as a system, as a cycle. 12, 20, 12, 24, 30, 60. These numbers, you just keep finding them over and over and over again in the system of time. Why is it 30 degrees in a sign? Why is it 360 degrees in a year? Because that is the way that you can evenly divide the trip of the sun from winter solstice to summer solstice back to winter solstice through the course of tracking a sundial, which gives you 6 signs on one side, six signs on the other, evenly divided by 30 degrees each, which gives you that 180 degrees on each side of the year, which gives you the 360-degree cycle. That's why we're using zodiacal seasons as our solar months, solar seasons, and then tracking the actual days of the week and the lunar months based on the sun-moon relationship that inevitably boils itself back down to the number 12. And it goes on and on and on. The other thing we have in the Almanac, that we're trying to bring in, is there's more than one type of hour system. So the first hour system that we're introducing is there's like 4 or 5 different hour systems, and they all can be used for different things, which kind of brings me back to another point of what this is all about, is that like the calendar is spiritual. We base our religions and our celebrations and the way we relate to the earth based on the calendar. Like, that's how we root ourselves into things. And so I'm adding all of these different elements to help add nuance to the way that we celebrate time, space, and our relationship to the earth. And so this tidal chart is another aspect of the moon. And the bungee cord metaphor that I used when talking about the sun and earth's relationship is also what we see in the fluctuation of the wave patterns in the ocean and its relationship to the moon. And the more I learn about tide theory, the more I'm amazed that we have tide charts. And they've been tracking tide charts for years and years, centuries and centuries. And part of what a tide chart represents is the relationship between the earth and the moon. And it also is a relationship of how energy moves in dynamic waves and not static waves. Let's see, I'll pull up a tide chart on a different page so we can... And I'm doing a lot of hand calculations for things like the face change thing. I'm doing all those calculations by hand using like AstroSeek as like a astrological chart, but like needing to do the math to create like when the change happens, like it's all being done by hand. Um, just just so you know. And then for the tide charts too, like I couldn't find a tide chart that like felt like people could relate to it easily. So I had to like rewrite or remap out the tides into the chart that's in the almanac. And so this is the first thing I want to show. Not all high and low tides are equal. There's high highs, low lows, medium highs, and medium lows. And then that cycle shifts based on the relationship between the sun and the moon. The full moon is what gives us our highest highs and our lowest lows. And that gravitational force is also felt when the sun and moon are together. And these waves, literal waves, they change. And so what you can see here, let me go up a little further here. What you can see here is the tides fluctuate in what time they're rising and setting, but it's cyclical. It's just a larger, longer cycle. And look at this. Even in this usharbors.com title chart, they're telling you what the moon phase is, because the moon matters to people who live nautical lives. Fishermen, surfers, hobbyists, sailors, they need to know how vibrant and dynamic the waves are going to be, and they're going to know that based on what moon phase we're in. So regardless of how far we try to separate ourselves from the experience of lunar consciousness, all of our coastal workers, all of our coastal minded people, our fishermen, our hobbyists, our surfers, our sailors, they have to pay attention to the moon. There's no getting away from it. If you want to be on the ocean, you need to know what the moon is doing. And in a comment on Patreon, it was noted that the moon, and also in this in the book that I'm reading this month called Tides, let's see, I should post this in the Patreon, but it'd be cool if people joined me in reading this book, actually. It's called Tides, the Science and Spirit of the Ocean. Wonderful book. But these, like, when the highs are high and when the lows are lows, changes through the course of the lunar cycle, changes course through the ocean cycle, but that's all connected. And when you're looking at a zodiacal chart, this is when the moon is on the ascendant or the descendant, on the MC or the IC. When the moon is at the pivot points, when the moon is at the pivot points of your area, and I'm not saying the first, 7th, 4th, and 10th houses, because it is more, it's about the pivot points, it's about the actual MCIC, because it's related to where you are, longitude and latitude on the Earth. However, on Selene's Almanac, I did some latitude, longitude shifting and stuff like that, looking around different time zones and stuff like that. If you just map this, if you just map this, there's plenty of space to write if you print this out. If you just change these to your time zone, the moon is going to be either approaching or separating from the IC, MC, ascendant, or descendant at these times. And so the high tide, what I have here is the first column is the AM high tide. I have this in military time to show this, but I have the AM high tide as the first set of times, and that's going to be when the moon is rising. So you can use this to roughly look at when the moon is going to rise in your area. And then the moon's going to be on the MC, and that's the low tide. And then the moon's going to be on the descendant, and that's the next high tide. Usually the highest tide is the 7th house tide. And then the next low tide, or the lowest tide, is going to be when the moon is on the IC. Which when you think about that experientially, that makes sense because the moon is furthest from your part of the surface of the earth. And why do these matter? Experientially, I believe that these waves of energy, of gravitational pull and force, matter with how we experience the world emotionally around us. Water is connected to emotions. There's water in our blood and our body. We are 60-something% water. And these tidal fluctuations, we're going to feel them. But it's also a part of travel. What I notice so far is that when you so basically I sat at a restaurant for a really long period of time while I was calculating this almanac. I kind of did this on purpose as like an experiment. When the low time settled, it got busy at the restaurant, and I was confused at that at first, but then I realized that the tide had brought them in. Like, people were traveling at the while the tide was high, and then they landed where they wanted to be at this restaurant when the tide was low, and the restaurant got busy. And then as the tide rose again, the restaurant emptied out, as if like the waves of the moon's gravitational pull is like carrying us from place to place. And it reminded me of the moon's association with travel, and how if you want to travel on the seas, you need to know what phase the moon is in, what the tides are doing, and how that's going to affect your experience as you travel. And then I also noticed that, and I'm going to do some more research on this, but there's a possibility most of the time in most of the charts that I checked when looking at these tide fluctuations, most of the time the moon was approaching the pivots. And that may have something to do with the idea of what a succedent house is. And now I'm getting into more like astrological stuff. And so if you don't know what a succedent house is, like, there's some great YouTube videos on it. Definitely the Astrology podcast has a YouTube. Well, first of all, he's going through a really long deep dive, and I really appreciate it, about each house individually. But there's an older post on the Astrology podcast with Chris Brennan, Austin Coppock, and Kira Sutherland, I believe. And they just do a 2-part episode about the houses. But there may be a connection to the idea of a succedent house with the moon approaching the pivot points and the tides. is what the long part of that is me saying. And then what I want to do more with the almanac, I want to add more like a lot of this is really like technical stuff, but I've given the Gregorian calendrical dates so that you can function. Each one starts with a night, and I go night day, night day, night day. I show the phase of the moon. I tell you what the beginning ruler is of the darkness of the first hour of darkness or the first hour of light, so that you can go back and use the table. I've created a note-taking sheet to follow each 5-day week, and I've separated the weeks into 5 days and 10-day weeks, and as a way of reflecting back to the Egyptian system of the decans, which I'm going to try to include and explore. I want to have written material in here about each decan eventually. I'll be making some posts in the Patreon this month that include my prayer to Saturn, my initiate's prayer to Saturn, which is basically a prayer to Saturn that goes over the general significations of the planet. Saturn rules Capricorn. We're in the season of Capricorn. Here's initiate prayer to Saturn, and you know, some other things like that. Maybe how to set up a Saturn altar, things of that nature. I want to include things into the almanac, but I didn't have time. But eventually, that's the goal. And there's other versions of hour systems that I'm going to include, and I'm going to expand upon the tides hour system as I go on. And this is just the beginning of a really long project, and I appreciate anybody who joins me in this. And I'd like to teach other people how to make it for their area, because I believe the nuance of time is important, and it is singular to your area. And also, like, I hope that if you use Selene's Almanac, you take notes and pay attention to the planetary hours, not just for using them to pray to your deities or pray to the planets or whatever spiritual practice you use, but I hope that you take note, because all of astrology, all of timekeeping is built on experiential observation note taking. And opening yourself up to observing reality instead of wanting, desiring, needing, contacting, doing, you know, all of that desiring, contacting, needing, doing, like all of that is solar consciousness. It's what the sun does. The sun expresses its light. It radiates upon us. It shoots out. It glares. It illuminates. It bonifies. It makes things perceivable. And that's what solar consciousness is about. It's active, and I mean that in the sense of like it's about doing and being and outward expression. Lunar consciousness is about observing. And the sun does all of that work so that we can see and experience our existence. And part of that experience is observation and reflection. And that's what lunar consciousness is. And that's what Selene's Almanac is creating space for, is a system of time that asks us to be observant. So, fellow traveler, I've reached the end of my breath, and I ask you to join me on this mission through time and space. Till the day you die, you're doing it whether you like it or not. I'll host another Q&A session next week, maybe even on Saturday, it's Gregorian Saturday. And I'll try to always say that when I'm talking about time. And so today is the day of Saturn, 1223. So maybe the day of the moon, 1225. I'll do another open live session like I was doing a while ago. And maybe more people will join me. And maybe I'll be better organized. I don't know. But if you have questions, pop them in the comments. Till then, thank you for joining me. May the fire inside guide you.